How did a success manual from 1937 predict the exact strategy of the 2024 presidential election? The answer isn't in the polls, it's in the mastermind.
Forget traditional politics. The real engine behind the 2024 election victory was written almost a century ago by Napoleon Hill. Today, on Catalyst Power, we decode the ultimate mastermind.
Welcome back to Catalyst Power. I am so glad you're here today because we are embarking on a deep dive that takes two completely unrelated worlds and crashes them together in a way that actually explains a lot about the world we are living in right now.
Yeah, it really does.
And if you're the kind of person who likes to, look under the hood of major historical events rather than just reading the headline, you are definitely in the right place.
Absolutely.
We all know the scoreboard from 2024. Donald Trump secured a historic non-consecutive second term. 312 electoral college votes, the national popular vote, and he improved margins in practically every corner of the map.
Right. But we aren't here to rehash the numbers or talk about typical campaign strategies like ad buys or, door knocking. We are here to look at the psychological engine that actually drove those numbers.
It really is a fascinating intersection. And to understand exactly how that engine worked, we're pulling from an incredibly diverse stack of materials today.
Very diverse.
On one side, we have in-depth political and demographic data. So that's a massive post-election analysis from the Pew Research Center, academic papers on voter behavior from UCLA, and these detailed election autopsy reports.
Yeah. But we are crossing that data with something you would normally find in a completely different section of the bookstore.
Right, which is wild.
In Napoleon Hill's 1937 self-help classic, Think and Grow Rich, along with modern psychological analyses of his work.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because on the surface, a 1930s self-help book and a modern presidential campaign seem like, a bizarre pairing.
They do. But the core premise we are exploring today is how the actual mechanics of that 2024 victory, particularly the populist rhetoric and the media strategy, function as a massive real-world application of the success principles Napoleon Hill laid out almost a century ago.
Yes, and before we get into the weeds, it is crucial to explicitly state the strictly impartial nature of this deep dive.
Exactly. Our goal today is not to endorse or condemn any political viewpoint, candidate, or policy. We are taking a purely analytical approach.
Just looking at the mechanics.
Precisely. We are examining the structural and psychological parallels found within our source material to understand how a specific type of political movement functions mechanically.
Right. Specifically, we're going to look at how that 2024 populist movement operated as a giant macro-level version of Napoleon Hill's most famous concept, the Mastermind group.
Right. We are just looking at the blueprint. So let's start with the foundation.
Okay, in Think and Grow Rich, Hill lays out 13 principles. But it all starts with one absolutely non-negotiable rule.
Definiteness of purpose.
Yes. Definiteness of purpose paired with a burning desire. Hill spent 20 years studying 500 self-made millionaires during the early 20th century. People like Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Andrew Carnegie, and he concluded that absolutely every major success starts with a single, unwavering goal.
You have to know exactly what you want and pursue it with an obsession that leaves zero room for a plan B.
But you know what is interesting about that? A lot of people have goals. In politics, every candidate wants to win.
Sure.
But wanting to win and having a true definiteness of purpose are functionally different in Hill's framework. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can look at the relentless pursuit of the presidency after the 2020 loss.
Oh, right. Regardless of the immense hurdles, multiple legal battles, unprecedented institutional criticism, even an assassination attempt in July of 2024, there was a singular, laser-like focus on returning to the White House.
This ties directly into Hill's concept of autosuggestion.
I want to pause on autosuggestion because it sounds a bit like, I don't know, an old parlor trick.
It does sound a bit mystical.
Yeah. But the modern psychological interpretations of Hill's work describe it basically as acting as if you have already succeeded. It is a psychological loop of feedback. Exactly.
You constantly feed your subconscious mind with absolute belief in your inevitable victory, which effectively creates a new reality by dictating your actions. You ignore critics, you make quick decisions, and you repeat your goals until they materialize. You build mental armor.
Exactly. And this is where political analysis takes on an entirely new context. In the UCLA research papers we examined, political scientists strongly criticized Donald Trump's 2024 election campaign rhetoric. They likened it to negative populism, or a flood of lies, and pointed to his apocalyptic framing of the country's future and his utter refusal to acknowledge previous defeats.
But wait, if you look at that strictly through Napoleon Hill's lens, that fire hose of falsehoods isn't just a politician being stubborn or chaotic. It functions psychologically as mass autosuggestion.
Precisely. Hill emphasizes that to achieve your definite purpose, you must maintain absolute faith in your narrative and systematically refuse to acknowledge defeat, or what he calls negative influences.
Which is the opposite of normal politics.
Right. In traditional politics, when a candidate takes a hit in the polls, they pivot. They soften their message to appease the center. They acknowledge the criticism.
Think of Mitt Romney or John Kerry. They were constantly trying to calibrate their message to whatever the media or the moderate base demanded that week.
But the 2024 populist strategy refused to pivot. They doubled down.
They did. By constantly projecting inevitable victory, framing the campaign as the final battle, and completely ignoring traditional political norms or media fact-checking, the campaign effectively blocked out those negative influences.
Wow. They maintained absolute faith in the narrative. And through sheer, unyielding repetition, that narrative embedded itself into the subconscious of the electorate. It gave the base a compelling, urgent reason to vote, which maximized turnout. Any deviation or compromise would have weakened the autosuggestion.
So the refusal to moderate the tone wasn't a lack of discipline. It was a textbook execution of maintaining definiteness of purpose against conventional advice.
Absolutely. And the rhetoric itself was highly specific. When a politician repeatedly uses phrases like, "I am your retribution," they aren't just rallying a crowd. According to Hill, a definite purpose has to be fueled by a burning desire. Retribution, anger, and reclaiming a perceived lost greatness are incredibly potent emotional fuels.
They are. And that emotional intensity is required for the next step.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because having a personal definiteness of purpose is one thing. But you can't win a national election alone. You have to scale it.
Let's transition to the core focus of this deep dive, the Mastermind group.
This is the critical piece. Hill defined the mastermind as a coordination of knowledge and effort in a spirit of harmony between two or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose.
What's fascinating here is the sheer scale of the adaptation. Hill originally studied intimate elite groups, Henry Ford, sitting in a boardroom with Thomas Edison and Harvey Firestone, sharing knowledge and energy to build industry.
Right? The 2024 campaign took this interpersonal boardroom concept and engineered a macro mastermind.
I want to play devil's advocate for a second. How do you take an intimate concept like a mastermind and apply it to a country of 330 million people without losing that perfect harmony Hill says is required?
You do it through the very mechanics of populism. Populism, by its academic definition, divides society into two distinct warring groups: the pure people versus the corrupt elite.
Donald Trump's 2024 election campaign framed the entire election in exactly this way.
Us versus them.
Exactly. It was us, the forgotten men and women, the working class. versus them, the political establishment, the legacy media, the institutions. By creating a very clear existential outgroup, you automatically generate a powerful, unifying in-group.
That makes total sense. That us versus them framing perfectly engineered the psychological harmony required for a mastermind to function across millions of people.
One of the video breakdowns of Hill's philosophies we reviewed brings up a concept that sounds a little sci-fi at first, but stick with me.
I know the one you mean.
It argues that when two minds come together in perfect harmony, they create a third invisible force. The video likens it to the observer effect in quantum physics, where the collective expectation or belief of the observer actually shapes the physical reality of the outcome.
It sounds esoteric, but think of it purely as a psychological metaphor for collective consciousness.
Right. When you apply that to the political rallies of the 2024 campaign, the scale of that invisible force is staggering. Rallies were a staple of the brand.
But strategically, they weren't just traditional campaign stops where a guy stands behind a podium and reads policy points.
No, they were events. They were real-time synchronization events.
Right? Imagine 50,000 people in a stadium and millions more streaming it live. They're all chanting the exact same things, experiencing the exact same emotional spikes, focusing their collective energy on the exact same apocalyptic warnings and promises of a restored future.
Hill actually wrote that human brains are essentially like radio broadcasting stations. They pick up the thought vibrations of others.
Broadcasting and receiving.
Exactly. By keeping the base in a state of high emotional intensity, tapping into the fear of an open border, the acute economic anxiety of high grocery prices, or the anger at institutional elites, the campaign ensured its macro mastermind was broadcasting and receiving on the exact same frequency.
Which means the followers adopted the leader's definiteness of purpose as their own personal mission.
Okay, but let's look at the logistics of this in the modern era. I want you, the listener, to imagine trying to build this perfectly harmonized group today. How do you actually reach these people?
It's a huge challenge. We live in a fractured media landscape. Millions of people have completely tuned out of the evening news. They don't read the morning paper. To build this mastermind, you have to find a way to bypass the traditional gatekeepers.
And the Donald Trump's campaign completely bypassed legacy media.
No CNN town halls. No traditional Sunday morning sit-downs. They largely bypassed even traditional conservative outlets like Fox News.
This brings us to one of the most highly specific and brilliantly executed media strategies detailed in the academic papers, which researchers refer to as wooing the manosphere.
The experts call them low-propensity voters, which is basically a polite academic way of describing young guys who usually couldn't care less about election day, who don't answer pollsters, and who are completely invisible to traditional political models.
Exactly. To reach them, the campaign formed strategic alliances with long-form podcasters and internet influencers.
Massive platforms. We are talking about massive digital-first platforms. Joe Rogan, the comedian Theo Vaughn, the computer scientist Lex Fridman, internet pranksters like the Nelk Boys, and live video game streamers like Aiden Ross.
Imagine trying to explain to a political strategist from 1995 that the path to the White House runs through a 3-hour live-streamed video game session.
They'd think you had lost your mind. But functionally, it's a brilliant bypass. The papers describe this digital environment as transgression as entertainment. It's internet bro culture. And the candidate didn't show up to these podcasts in a stiff suit with a binder of sanitized talking points.
No, he adapted to the medium. He swapped the political jargon for authentic, unscripted, sprawling conversations. They talked about UFOs, UFC fights, and culture wars. It was completely tailored to resonate with young men who feel alienated by traditional, sanitized political correctness.
And from an analytical perspective, this is a flawless textbook execution of Hill's mastermind principle.
How so?
Hill explicitly writes that before forming your mastermind, you must decide what advantages and benefits you are going to offer the individual members in return for their cooperation. It cannot all be one-sided. It must be a symbiotic exchange of value.
Because no one is going to work indefinitely without some form of compensation.
Exactly. So, let's break down the compensation. What did the candidate offer these influencers? He offered them massive, record-breaking viewership spikes. He offered them unprecedented cultural relevance.
He brought the spotlight. He gave them the ultimate validation of hosting a former and future president, elevating them above traditional journalists.
And in return, the influencers gave him their credibility with their audience. They gave him their platforms. But most importantly, they gave him direct, unfiltered, 3-hour access to millions of disaffected male voters.
They coordinated their knowledge and effort in a spirit of harmony to completely circumvent the traditional media apparatus. It was a perfectly aligned alliance of mutual benefit.
The influencers got the clout. The campaign got the vote.
Precisely. So, what does this all mean? We have to look at the tangible, real-world results of this strategy. We established a scoreboard earlier, but the underlying data from the Pew Research Center reveals what actually happened beneath the surface.
The campaign didn't just turn out its traditional base. It built a surprisingly diverse coalition.
The demographic shifts are highly significant. The Pew data shows tangible increases in support from working-class Hispanic voters, Black men, and Asian American voters.
In a deeply polarized country, this is a profound demographic realignment.
It is. And what united this incredibly diverse group? The data indicates it wasn't strictly ideology. They were united by acute pocketbook issues, high inflation, the impossibility of housing affordability, and concerns over border security impacting local communities.
The populist message focused heavily on these very tangible everyday anxieties. It created a unifying definiteness of purpose that actually transcended traditional racial or ethnic voting blocks.
They all tuned into the exact same frequency because they were all feeling the exact same economic pinch.
But to truly understand why this macro mastermind worked so effectively, we have to look at why the opposing sides struggled to counter it.
Right, the autopsy reports.
The detailed election autopsy reports we reviewed suggest that the Democratic coalition fundamentally failed to maintain that required perfect harmony.
And Napoleon Hill is brutal on this point. A mastermind fails, unequivocally, the moment absolute harmony is lost.
While the Republican coalition achieved a highly coordinated ideological harmony driven by specific economic anxieties, the Democratic side struggled with severe internal dissonance.
We can see this dissonance clearly in the data. A glaring example from the autopsy reports is the fracturing over foreign policy. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza deeply alienated Arab American voters and younger progressives in absolutely crucial swing states.
Michigan is the perfect example. It has the largest share of Arab American voters in the country. Over 100,000 Democrats voted uncommitted, specifically to protest the administration's Middle East policy.
Wayne County alone was a massive shift. You cannot have a mastermind if a significant portion of the group is actively protesting the leadership.
Furthermore, let's look at the economic messaging. An autopsy survey focusing specifically on working-class voters in Pennsylvania found something fascinating. It showed that strong progressive economic messages actually dramatically outperformed the campaign's chosen message.
Which was what, exactly?
Which focused almost entirely on Donald Trump being a fundamental threat to democracy.
And if we apply Hill's framework to that Pennsylvania data, it makes perfect sense. A mastermind requires a tangible shared desire. For a working-class voter struggling to buy groceries, abstract arguments about democratic norms don't trigger that burning desire.
The threat to democracy message was too abstract. The Democrats lacked the specific, grounded definiteness of purpose that Hill demands to galvanize the masses.
Exactly. The Harris campaign invested heavily in soft, moderate messaging, trying to appeal to suburban moderate Republicans. But in doing so, They failed to mobilize their own working class base. They lost the frequency.
The Republican coalition identified a common enemy, the elites, the status quo, and utilized modern, untraditional media to amplify that precise message.
The opposing sides simply could not generate a unified collective consciousness. Their internal friction broke the power of their collective effort. It's a textbook collapse of harmony.
It is incredibly revealing when you view it through this 1930s lens. Whether you view the 2024 populist campaign as a brilliant masterpiece of modern political strategy or a deeply concerning display of dark rhetoric, the actual mechanics behind it are undeniably aligned with Napoleon Hill's blueprints.
From the absolute unwavering definiteness of purpose following the 2020 loss, to weaponizing the mastermind principle through 3-hour podcast hangouts and massive stadium rallies, the 2024 election is a definitive masterclass in the power of mass autosuggestion.
This raises an important question. It encourages us to step back from the politics of it all and think critically about how these exact same principles operate in our daily lives.
These tools, autosuggestion, the mastermind, the manipulation of collective consciousness, are entirely neutral. They are just psychological levers, and they are being pulled by corporations, marketers, and algorithms every single day to influence your behavior.
If human politicians are using these 1930s mastermind principles to hack our collective consciousness through podcasts and rallies, what happens when artificial intelligence fully enters the chat?
That is a terrifying thought. Imagine a highly advanced algorithm designed not just to feed you targeted ads, but to form a personalized, perfectly harmonious digital mastermind with you. An AI that learns exactly what you fear, exactly what you desire, and uses perfect autosuggestion to shape your individual reality.
A mastermind of one.
Exactly. The 2024 election showed us the awesome power of an analog mastermind, but it might just be the prequel to a very strange, hyper-personalized digital future. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep questioning, keep looking under the hood, and we will catch you next time to Catalyst Power.